China has been watching this war very carefully, not with concern, not with alarm, with professional attention, the way an engineer watches a stress test, the way a general studies a battle he didn't fight but intends to learn from. Because China is not a bystander to what is happening in the Middle East. China is a student, and what it is studying, with full intelligence resources, with military analysts working around the clock, with a professional focus that should alarm American planners, is the question it has been asking for years. Can American air defenses actually handle a modern missile campaign? Can American carrier groups survive in a contested environment? What does it actually cost in money and munitions and time to degrade an adversary's air defenses? The war against Iran is answering these questions in real time, and every answer is going into the assessment of what a conflict over Taiwan would look like. Today, we are going to walk through exactly what China has been learning from the Iran war, the air defense lessons, the munitions consumption data, the carrier group vulnerability assessment, the timeline analysis. We are going to explain why the intelligence that China is gathering from this conflict is changing its Taiwan calculations. And we are going to be honest about what those changed calculations mean for American security in the Pacific. Part 1. China's Strategic Learning Program. China's military, the People's Liberation Army, operates one of the most sophisticated strategic intelligence and analysis operations in the world. It has formal structures dedicated to studying foreign conflicts and extracting applicable lessons. After the 1991 Gulf War, Chinese military analysts wrote extensively about the revolution in precision strike warfare that American forces had demonstrated against Iraq. They concluded that China's military was decades behind and needed to transform. That transformation program, funded by China's explosive economic growth and guided by what China learned from watching American warfare, is what produced the PLA of 2026, a force with precision ballistic missiles, advanced air defenses, substantial submarine forces, growing carrier aviation, and the most extensive integrated air defense system in the world. China is now watching the Iran war with the same analytical intensity that it brought to studying the Gulf War in 1991, and the lessons it is extracting have direct implications for Taiwan planning. The Iran war is, from China's perspective, the most important real-world test of the kind of precision strike campaign that American planners have been developing against Chinese military infrastructure for years. China wants to know, does it work? How quickly? At what cost? What vulnerabilities does it expose? What defensive approaches limit its effectiveness? Part 2. The Air Defense Lessons. The first and most important lesson China is extracting concerns air defense. Iran built one of the most sophisticated air defense networks in the Middle East over the past 2 decades. It combined Russian-supplied S-300 systems with domestically produced equivalents, supplemented by shorter-range systems and radar networks designed specifically to survive American and Israeli strikes. Iranian military planners studied Israeli strikes against Syrian air defenses and tried to build a system that was distributed, redundant, and survivable. Operation Epic Fury has been degrading that system, not instantly, not completely, but systematically. CAD, suppression of enemy air defenses, is what the U.S. and Israel call the opening phase of a strike campaign, and in Iran it has been doing its job. China is watching 2 things very carefully in this process. The first is the sequencing and methodology. How do American and Israeli planners identify air defense nodes? How do they sequence strikes to degrade radar coverage, command and control, and launch systems in a way that progressively opens corridors for further strikes? Understanding the methodology helps China design its own air defenses to be more resistant to the same approach. The second is the revealed capabilities. Every time an American or Israeli strike successfully hits an Iranian air defense installation, it reveals information about what reconnaissance assets found the target, how long the intelligence-to-strike cycle takes, what weapons were used, and what the Iranian defensive response was. All of this is intelligence about American and Israeli capabilities that China did not have at the same resolution before this war began. China's conclusion from watching this process will almost certainly be: Iran's air defenses were not layered and redundant enough. China's own integrated air defense system is more sophisticated, more layers, more redundancy, better integration of different types of sensors and weapons. But the lesson is also directional. Even a sophisticated air defense system can be systematically degraded by a sustained campaign with modern precision weapons and adequate ISR capabilities. For Taiwan planning, the air defense lesson cuts both ways. China's strikes against Taiwan's air defenses in an initial attack would face similar challenges. And China has been studying, from the Iranian example, how to make its strikes more effective at quickly opening corridors in an adversary's defenses. Part 3. The munitions consumption problem. The second major lesson China is tracking is what analysts call the munitions consumption problem. And this is the lesson that has American planners most concerned. Modern precision strike warfare consumes large numbers of expensive guided weapons very quickly. The United States and Israel have been firing large quantities of cruise missiles, precision-guided bombs, and air-launched weapons in the Iran campaign. Each Tomahawk cruise missile costs approximately $2 million. JDAM precision guidance kits for bombs cost tens of thousands of dollars. Anti-radiation missiles that home on radar emissions cost hundreds of thousands of dollars each. The daily cost of a sustained strike campaign at this intensity runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars. This is not a financial problem for the United States in the short term. The U.S. can sustain this expenditure. The problem is inventory. The United States military has finite stockpiles of precision weapons. The production rate for many of these weapons, even with surge production, cannot keep up with wartime consumption at scale. Analysts have been warning for years that American precision weapons inventories are inadequate for a sustained high-intensity conflict. The Iran campaign is consuming weapons that would otherwise be available for a Taiwan conflict. Every Tomahawk fired at an Iranian target is a Tomahawk that is not available in the Pacific. Every air defense interceptor used against Iranian missiles is one that cannot intercept Chinese missiles later. China is watching the consumption rate carefully. American and allied production cannot be rapidly increased. Semiconductor chips, precision guidance systems, and solid rocket motors all have production lead times measured in months and years, not days. An extended Iran campaign that significantly draws down American precision weapons inventories creates a window of relative weakness in the Pacific that China must note in its planning. For China, the lesson is strategic patience. If the Iran campaign extends for months, American readiness for a simultaneous or sequential Taiwan conflict degrades. This is not a reason for China to act opportunistically in the immediate near term. It has its own planning timeline for Taiwan and is not ready for that operation on a short timeline. But it informs China's assessment of when American readiness will be at its weakest. Part 4. The Carrier Vulnerability Question. Perhaps the most closely watched aspect of the Iran war from China's perspective is the carrier group question. American carriers are the most powerful symbols of American military projection capacity. They are also the primary threat that China has been designing its anti-access/area denial strategy to counter. China has invested billions of dollars in the DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles, weapons specifically designed to threaten American carrier groups at ranges up to 3,000 kilometers. These weapons are sometimes called carrier killers. Whether carrier killers actually work in practice, whether they can survive interception, acquire and track moving targets accurately, and hit ships protected by defensive systems, has been a theoretical question. The Iran war is providing some relevant data, though not a direct test. Iran has anti-ship ballistic missiles, less capable than China's DF-26, but in the same general class. It has cruise missiles, it has drones. The performance of these weapons against American naval defenses in the Gulf has been partially observed by Chinese intelligence. The performance of American defensive systems, particularly Aegis and its associated interceptors, against the variety of threats Iran has deployed, is being analyzed. China's assessment of carrier vulnerability will not be radically changed by this conflict, but it will be refined. The specific performance data, hit rates, intercept rates, the effectiveness of electronic countermeasures, the performance of Iranian systems against American defenses, all feeds into models of how American carrier groups would perform in the much more intense threat environment of a China-US-Taiwan conflict. The critical difference China knows to account for: Iran's anti-ship capabilities are a fraction of China's. China has more missiles, more capable missiles, more sophisticated targeting systems, and far greater ability to conduct coordinated multi-axis attacks against a carrier group. The Iran war does not prove carriers are survivable in a China conflict, but it is informing Chinese assessments of exactly how to overwhelm the defenses that have so far managed the Iranian threat. Part 5. The Strait, Hormuz, and Strait of Taiwan comparison. The Strait of Hormuz closure has given China an intelligence windfall on a question it cares deeply about. How does the international community respond to maritime chokepoint closure? China's Taiwan strategy depends, in part, on the ability to blockade Taiwan, to cut off Taiwan's trade, energy imports, and military resupply by controlling the sea approaches. This raises a question Chinese planners have been studying. What would the international and American response to a naval blockade look like? What are the economic, political, and diplomatic consequences? The Iran experience is now providing real-world data. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, and the world, for a period, accepted it. Insurance companies pulled out. Shipping companies suspended operations. Oil prices surged. The American response was naval escort operations and diplomatic pressure, not an immediate military attack to force the strait open. China is noting several things from this. Insurance withdrawal and shipping company suspension happened within days of the threat declaration, before a single ship was actually sunk. The commercial shipping sector is more risk-averse than military planners assumed. The combination of mine threats, missile threats, and drone threats created effective deterrence against civilian shipping without requiring Iran to sink a major vessel. For a Taiwan scenario, China is assessing whether a similar approach, declaring a military exclusion zone around Taiwan backed by credible threats, could achieve many of the goals of a blockade without requiring the direct conflict with American forces that a full invasion would entail. The Iran experience suggests the commercial shipping sector would respond extremely quickly to such a declaration, potentially allowing economic strangulation of Taiwan without direct military confrontation. American naval planners are aware of this lesson. The response, and this is being developed in American Pacific strategy right now, is pre-commitment. Clear American declarations that a blockade of Taiwan would trigger direct American military response, backed by visible force deployments and bilateral agreements. The goal is to close off the Hormuz-style gradual coercion option before China can exercise it. Part 6. The Two-Front Nightmare. Let's discuss what American military planners are losing sleep over: the two-front problem. The United States military is currently committed to a significant operation in the Middle East. Carrier groups are deployed in the region. Precision weapons inventories are being drawn down. Air Force sortie rates are high. Intelligence assets are focused on the Iran campaign. The administrative, logistical, and planning bandwidth of the American military is significantly consumed by an active war. American military doctrine holds that the United States must be able to fight in two major regional conflicts simultaneously. This has been official policy since the end of the Cold War. But official policy and actual capability are not always the same thing. In practice, fighting one major war while maintaining full readiness for a second is extraordinarily demanding on people, equipment, and supply chains that are all finite. China knows this. China knows that American readiness for a Taiwan conflict is reduced while the Iran campaign continues. China knows that the weapons being consumed in the Middle East are not available in the Pacific. China knows that the military planners, intelligence analysts, and senior commanders who are consumed by the Iran war are not giving their full attention to the Pacific. Is China going to exploit this by moving on Taiwan in the next weeks? Almost certainly not. China's Taiwan operation, when it comes, will be planned over years and executed when China judges the conditions to be optimal, not in a window of opportunity measured in weeks, with global attention on the Middle East and American political will visibly tested. China is patient. It does not need to rush. But China is noting what has been revealed about American strategic capacity, that the two-front capability has limits, that the Pacific is currently somewhat reduced in priority, and that sustained Middle Eastern operations impose costs on Pacific readiness that accumulate over time. This is intelligence that will inform Chinese planning for years, not for tomorrow, for whenever China judges the moment to be right. China is watching. It is watching Iranian air defense performance and degradation. It is watching American precision weapons consumption. It is watching carrier group operations in a contested maritime environment. It is watching how the international community responds to chokepoint closure. It is watching American public opinion respond to casualties. It is watching what a two-front commitment does to American military capacity. Every data point is going into an assessment, not of whether to act on Taiwan. China has its own timeline and its own conditions for that decision, but of what a conflict over Taiwan would actually look like, how American forces would fight, what American vulnerabilities exist, and what Chinese capabilities need to be further developed. The Iran war is not the Taiwan war, but it is the most comprehensive intelligence collection event about American military capabilities and political will that China has had access to in a generation. China's military is using it. The question for American planners and for American citizens who want to understand what national security looks like in the next decade is whether the decisions being made in the Middle East today are being made with full awareness of their implications for the Pacific tomorrow. If you want to understand how American strategy is being adjusted for the Pacific in response to Middle East lessons, what Taiwan's own military preparedness looks like, and what a China-U.S. conflict scenario would realistically involve, subscribe now. Naval power, because the ocean is where the next war begins.